Hey everyone, I'm Liz Ferry, and today I'm going to show you how I made this super cute 1920s inspired cloche hat out of crochet. Some things you'll need for this project are a size H crochet hook, a pair of scissors, a stitch marker, a yarn needle, a regular hand sewing needle and thread, some black ribbon, this one is 7/8 of an inch wide, a bit of elastic if you want the band to be removable, and you'll need your yarn. I'm going to use 2 strands of yarn at the same time to create a bulkier weight yarn and to create a flecked, almost tweed-like appearance. To pull this off, I'm using 2 shades of the same color. This amethyst yarn from Loops and Threads Impeccable, and this plum yarn from Karen's Simply Soft. I like using a soft yarn, since they're usually a little shinier than other yarns, so the different shades will stand out more. And of course, the final hat will be softer and more comfortable to wear. First, I'm going to make a double magic circle with 12 stitches of double crochet. So into my circle, I'll pull up a loop and chain 2. That's going to count as the first stitch of double crochet. Then I'll double crochet 11 more times into the circle. Now I'll close my circle by pulling on the tail a little bit until I have a bigger loop and a smaller loop, then pull the smaller loop from the side closest to the tail until the bigger loop closes completely. Then pull on the tail until the remaining loop closes. And now for every other stitch of the project, I'm going to work around the front post of the stitch only, instead of into the top of the stitch like normal. I know it's a bit tough to see very well what I'm doing with this darker purple yarn, so before we continue making our hat, let's practice some front post double crochet using a brighter yarn. To show you how to do the next step, I've made this little sample using a bright pink yarn, with 12 double crochets worked in a double magic circle just like the first row of the hat. So in the next row, I'm going to increase each stitch, which means I'll be working 2 double crochets for each stitch of the previous row. Normally that would just be creating 2 double crochet stitches here, into the top of the stitch. But since I'm going to work onto the front posts for each stitch, I need to create my stitches here, around the actual body of the stitch instead. So I'll yarn over and pull up a loop around that front post of the stitch. Then double crochet around the stitch, and then to increase, I'll just double crochet again around the same stitch. So yarn over, pull up a loop around that stitch, and double crochet. And I'll increase just like that for every stitch of the row, since this is the first row of increase. In the next row of increase, I'll do the same thing, this time increasing every second stitch. Then in the third row, I'll increase every third stitch, and in the fourth row, I'll increase every fourth stitch. So for the second row of increase, I'll double crochet around the post for the first stitch of the row, then increase around the post of the second stitch of the row, and repeat that pattern around the whole row. Then just do the same thing for the remaining 2 rows of increase. In the third row, increase every third stitch of the row, and in the fourth row, increase every fourth stitch of the row. Now I'll do the same thing to the actual hat using the dark purple yarns. Alright, I've finished with 4 rows of increase to widen the top of the hat. Now I'm going to create 12 rows of double crochet, again still working on the front post of the stitch only, to make the top of the hat get longer. You may not want to go on for this many rows, but I just like the look of a really deep cloche hat, so I went on double crocheting around the post for 12 more rows. Alright, I've gotten to the end of 12 rows of double crochet without any increase. Finally, I'll create the brim of the hat. There's lots of ways you could make the brim, But for my hat, I'm just going to do a basic increase, following the same pattern that I used to create the top of the hat. I'm once again going to increase 12 times per row. Since I last increased at the top every 4th stitch of the row, in the next row I'll increase every 5th stitch. Then every 6th stitch in the row after that, every 7th stitch in the next row, and every 8th stitch in the last row. So double crochet around the post of the first 4 stitches, then increase the next stitch. And continue in that pattern until the end of the row. And then create 3 more rows of increase. At the end of the last row, you could end the work with a slip stitch into the first stitch of the row, but I like to skip the slip stitch and instead pull the yarn straight through the last stitch. Then I'll wrap the tail ends around the tops of the first and last stitch of the row a couple of times to fasten them together. And I'll sew in the remaining ends. Next I'll make the band that goes around the hat. I started with a bit of ribbon that's just a little longer than the final length of the finished band. Then I folded down the edges and sewed the ribbon down to a small strip of elastic. Make sure you don't make the ribbon the exact width of the hat. When you put the hat on, the hat will stretch out just a little bit, which might make the ribbon a little too tight. So make sure that you measure the length that the band should be while wearing the hat, so that it's stretched out to its full size. And then sew the elastic to the ribbon to make the band stretch. Now for the decorative flower, I cut 2 12-inch strips of ribbon and gathered both with a running stitch. One of the strips I gathered into a ring, and the other I gathered into a spiral with 2 smaller rings. I'm also using this simple crocheted flower that I made using one of the yarns that I used to make the hat, a flower-shaped purple bead, and a pearl bead. Then I arranged them into a layered flower and sewed them together. Lastly, I sewed a bit of ribbon to the back of the flower to make a loop to attach to the band. If you want to permanently attach this to the band, just sew one side, put the flower over the band, and sew the other side. I want my flower to be removable, so I only sewed one side and fastened the other side around the ribbon with a couple of pins. And that's the hat done, but let's see what it looks like on. I am in love with this hat and really excited to make more of these in other colors, maybe with a different style of brim or a different ribbon decoration. But what do you think? What kind of hat do you think I should make next? Let me know in the comments. And as always, if you finished a project of your own using this or any of my videos, I'd love to see your work. You can find my social media links in the description below, or tag me on Instagram at LizFairy. If you liked this video, you could press the like button or share it on social media, and if you'd really like to help out the channel, you can donate to my Patreon. You can get some pretty cool perks through Patreon, like seeing my videos early and ad-free. Find out more about that at patreon.com/fairyrings. You could also subscribe and click the bell icon so that you don't miss any of my future videos. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!